Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Corinne Ernie. I'm the Chief Curator here at the Parrish Art Museum, and it gives me great pleasure to be speaking with one of the artists in the current exhibition, Artists Choose Parrish, and that's Alex Pearlstein. I'm just giving you a little bit of an overview of Artists Choose Parrish. It's a year-long exhibition series celebrating the 125th anniversary of the Parrish Art Museum, and we invited 41 renowned artists that have a deep connection to the East End to choose works from the collection to be shown alongside with their own works. So the artists have come up with some incredibly interesting stories and connections that they found in the collection. They saw works by artists that they knew very well, that they were friends with, artists who were mentors, but also artworks that they had never seen before, but they felt a resonance with. So right now we have 12 artists on view, and there's also going to be a third part of Artists Choose Parrish that opens at the end of October. So this is just to sort of set the groundwork here, and I am very pleased to introduce you to Alex Pearlstein, who is a fascinating artist in that she works in many media, including performance, video, collage, which is what you see mostly here. And I do see a lot of performance and storytelling in your work that you're presenting here. And interestingly enough, also a great connection to the East End. And we're going to go through these works, and we'll just be in conversation. And please feel free to ask questions if you have any. So I think, Alex, you wanted to start in front of the works of Philip Pearlstein, who accidentally has the same last name as you. And in your artist statement, you said, he's not my father, he's not related to me, but you're fascinated with him. Not just because of the name, but obviously his work. So we're standing right in front of one of his work here.
Yeah, I think when I first started looking through the collection, I looked for Philip Pearlstein because I had a few months prior to this opportunity started cutting Philip Pearlstein figures out of old catalogs of his, and also some that I found in magazines. And I was starting to develop like a subset of works that had Philip Pearlstein figures in them. And I knew that he summered on Fire Islands, and so I was very happy to find a work of his, and I kind of started from there building which works I wanted to work with and relationships with other artists in the collection. And I guess when I wrote, like, he's not my father, I'm not related to him, it's because my whole life people would, assume that maybe he was my father. I think he does have a daughter around my age. And then I felt like, I have this connection to this artist who I don't really feel that much of a connection to in terms of what I'm interested in and what I do over time. And now I would say to a degree, I'm kind of a figurative artist, but not in the way that we usually use that term. So I work with performance. I always work with actors or performers. I move people around in space. I move objects around in space. And I always am thinking about how that space is framed. So that is pretty much the definition of mise en scène. And that's how I think of most of these. Some of these are more pattern related, but some of these do make perspectival spaces. So I'm always looking for, there's always a figure that animates them. So using the Pearlstein figures, I'm still working with them right now, and it has a lot of just a lot of utility for my work.
Can you go a little bit into your process? Where do you start? What catches your interest? How do you create these stories with these collages? Where do you find the figures, and why do you combine certain figures and background images?
Yeah. I started cutting, it's like, this is traditional collage. There's nothing printed. Everything is cut out of magazine or catalog or art book, all kinds of magazines. And it's a way of working that I started in the early 90s. And I have these archive books that are have slide sheets in them, and they're filled with little tiny figures and then groups of figures. And there was a body of work that I made in 1996, I think. It's called Interiors. And those works kind of conform to this kind of perspectival configuration. And they were, became like storyboards for a video that reenacted the scene that took place in them. What draws me to choices, it's not, I mean, there's a lot of recognizable, familiar, iconic artworks in these works. I don't necessarily, some of them I feel very ambivalent towards. So like I would say the choices come from a combination of admiration that is sometimes love and ambivalence, familiarity, a kind of interest in dealing with that iconic image, maybe undermining it, and maybe often it's just a kind of utility, like I know I can do something with that, I know it's going to work for me. Yeah. The thing about the, like, Picasso, or like a lot of these...
Yeah, I just wanted to hone in here a little bit. So in this collage, and you can come closer if you like, we have this, the Guernica by Picasso, and you have Jackson Pollock doing his...
doesn't get more iconic.
Yes, active painting, action painting, and Carolee Schneemann, who performed the interior scroll for the first time out here at Ashawalk Hall. So this is a very historic moment, and what you found in our collection was actually a photograph of Fred McDarrah of Carolee Schneemann doing this performance at Ashawalk Hall. So an incredible serendipity of, you know, a trove in our collection. Yeah. But can you just unpack this a little bit for us?
Yeah. I guess I feel like it's something I maybe feel more than I've articulated, so I'm just going to like find my way through it. But I mean, I don't know if I really have thought that much about Guernica lately, but Guernica is part of my body. You know, Jackson Pollock painting, more his action, you know, like that image of him, the photograph of him painting, and the idea of his persona and his like performativity. You know, it's just something that's so ingrained into this sort of lexicon of art history and art that informs. And like, again, like that familiarity, there's an admiration, there's a love, but there's also just, I think, like an irritation and a friction. And I think with that friction, I can make relationships. So making a relationship between things, making a relationship between Jackson Pollock painting, scatter painting, which is messy, with interior scroll, which was messy. Yep. And there's something about the physicality and the visceral quality of it that...
Which you can see here.
Yeah.
Also, yeah.
And that was the connection, and that's when I mean, I feel a little silly, but like, and that's when I put the babies in. It was like there was something scatological, like a scatological connection. So it's like not the connections. That's when I feel like something starts to work. It's not the connections that are the art historical, but something like that comes out of that deep knowing that grown-up artists have, like after many years of working, that it's just like, it's right. And then it's like, oh my God, these things happened within like a couple of miles of each other in this part of the Springs, where I actually spent time around 3 Mile Harbor growing up, like, so.
That's literally a couple of miles removed from each other, where Jackson Pollock painted and where Carolee Schneemann had her performance. So this is an incredible coincidence and connection as well, right? I'd like to move on to these two, these pairings. So again, this is your work, and this is a work from the collection. This is a portrait of Chuck Close by Annie Leibovitz from 2000. And you made a collage of Chuck Close's big self-portrait with some female figures. And again, you're using a figure from Philip Perlstein, I think. So can you talk a little bit about this pairing?
Yeah, I want to point out also that in this lens of the eyeglass, it says shit, and it's like a take on the Robert Indiana love. So this Chuck Close image has been in my picture archive since the early 90s. It's just one of those iconic images. I think it was in the Whitney, which I would see, as a kid. Years ago, a friend of mine, a close younger friend of mine I felt very protective of, told me about a terrible experience she had with Chuck Close, which we've all read about. And she was one of the first people who spoke to the press about it. So it's not my personal experience, but it's my protective of my very dear younger friend secondary experience. And again, like, I didn't set out to make a piece about Chuck Close and his abuse of women, but I had the image and it came together, and I realized it was something I needed to, kind of deal with and to honor her experience. And, she's good with it.
And
yeah.
she knows about your work.
Oh, yeah, no, I've showed it to her. We've talked about it.
Yeah.
And she felt, I think her words were, she felt held by it. So
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
it's emotional. And it's some of these works have that, like, a much more clearer, maybe, point or narrative. Some where the associations are, more pointed, and this would be one of them. And some, it's more associative.
The term in Annie Leibowitz's photograph, an aggressive photograph. Could you speak a little more to that?
Yeah, I think the photograph is so vivid, and I feel that when I look at, I think what a portrait does is reveals something psychological about the subject, and I think this reveals something very aggressive and disturbed. That's the vibe I get from it. Like, I feel the aggression, I feel the tension, and that's, it's subjective, but.
In her words or in his body language?
Oh, in his expression, in the expression. I look at faces. That's, I think, where that comes through. I look at eyes. And you may not see that, but
I was curious because
yeah.
the artist's statement conclusion that I didn't initially see it. I saw it as a portrait of Chuck Close, and I didn't share your experience. Fortunately, I didn't know where that was coming from.
Well, I guess having a friend who has told you these stories made it probably more personal or more relevant to you.
It made it much more personal to me because she called me the night before she talked to the press about it, and we talked about it for a long time, and she decided not to use her name because she didn't want to give him that power. So that was...
Have you seen this photograph before that was reported to you?
No, I saw this photograph just, when I started looking for work from the collection here, So...
Yeah. Should we move on to
Yeah.
that wall?
I can move on to the less aggressive.
Well, it's interesting.
But there's more aggressive over there. We can go whichever way you want.
Oh, but right, these two?
Yeah.
Let's go here. So these are both your works. Yeah.
And I guess, this is another one that I would just say is more, has the more like pointed relationship. So that's, this is Carl Andre's zinc plane. And then the figure of the woman who's lying on it is taken from a Hernan Niche performance documentation. So that's kind of like a double header. More Philip Pearlstein.
Right here, right?
Yeah. There are multiple ways to read it, and I think, but it was again something that came together. I had that Carl Andre. I love minimalism. I love Carl Andre's work.
Right. That's
we don't have to go down the whole road.
Can you separate the artist from his art? Right?
No.
Can you separate the person from the art?
Yeah, it's too complicated.
Are there shades of accountability, or it's an interesting question.
And I'm not trying to solve that riddle. And I
Right.
don't know if anybody can, but all I can do is just try to work with it and find complexity.
And I think it does show that complexity because it has something also from the surrealist movement in it, like really evoking the subconscious. And so your work is not aggressive. I feel like your work is very evocative and gives you an entryway into the subject. Yeah.
Thank you.
If there are no questions, we'll move.
What was
Yes.
what was the method of the color of this one is obviously not black and white, but did you tint it?
No, it's from magazines,
they
so
were all
they're yeah. I've just works that I've made of these prior to this body of work had a lot more color in them, and then it just is sort of coming in and out. That one, it was really kind of working more with pattern and form and just, yeah, like more of, it doesn't have that same kind of narrative. It was, yeah, just more whimsical, I guess is the word I was looking for.
But it's true,
Yeah.
it is the one that stands out in terms of color.
Yeah. I wanted to have one
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
there are a few others in the group, but, yeah.
Right. Here, should we talk about the camels? Okay.
Yeah.
And here you're also including a work by another artist who is in the show right now, Via
Yeah.
Selmans.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. And Via Selmans' work is right outside in the spine.
Well, this gets me back to a lot of these works started with, I had, is that
Thank
okay?
you. Should we just, yeah, I was
Okay.
asking them.
So I haven't been talking about it, although actually the work with the Carolee Schneemann and Pollock has also a Barry LeVay in it. So the Barry LeVay was an artist who made these, he would never call them scatter, but for just speed, I'll say these scatter floor installations. And these two works, the grounds are Barry LeVay works, and also the one over there that we talked about before. And I have a whole bunch of works that use these Barry LeVay installations to make grounds and to make space and to, kind of set up these, not like something's happening in his installation, but to kind of transport the space with his elements. So I had a catalog that, I had a couple of the same catalog from one show, and they had, it was a show that was about beauty, and it had the Via Selmans, I hope I get this right, oceans, and the Hiroshi Sugimoto seascapes in the same catalog. And I thought it was such an interesting comparison, and I think comparison is something that happens in a lot of these, where elements are combined to create a comparison, but not always in ways that are obvious or in ways that are, mercurially come about through the making of the work. But in the case of the Selmans and Hiroshi Sugimoto, I think just this one is meticulously drawn. This is a photograph. So I started developing these two works together and adding other components, which are like a variety of other artists' works, including Nancy Graves' camels, which I will say I just love. Those are I just love them, and I think they're so beautiful and strange, and animating a space with those, along with people, just that surreal element, is kind of just a pleasure in doing that. And then some of the other figures are from Tricia Brown and Yvonne Rainer, and again, kind of iconic choreographers, and part of artists who are important to me, my own personal work and history. So
I think It shows that you're interested in choreography, performance. I feel like a lot of your works are choreographed, as if you're working with the actual people in these compositions.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that if I'm working with people in a space, or if I'm like animating a collage with figures, it is like, I'm coming back to that term mise en scène, where it's like,
Right.
how do these people get arranged in space, or how do these objects get arranged in space, and like directing.
And that creates relationships, and that's how you create or recreate new relationships among these characters or these figures or these sort of historical figures.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people who know my performance work better gravitate, we're like, oh, these are just like your work in performance. So it's not, if you don't know that, but.
Should we move to these works?
So I just wanted to mention one of the delights of going through the collection was finding Mary Ellen Bartley's work.
And she's standing right here with
She's
us.
standing right here to find a really interesting living artist work that really directly connected, and I just think it's such a beautiful piece, and it's these same Sugimoto photos, but in storage. In a book.
What inspired you to photograph Sugimoto in this way?
Oh, this is from a series that's specifically my photography books, standing open, photograph close-up, so it's all my favorite kind of photography books. They just become sort of this new space and a new view of them.
Right. Very contemplative, like his work. Yeah. And then, Alex, you selected this one also, just shows being sitting in front of this work.
Yeah, that was one of the later works that I chose. There was kind of like a two-phase process. Like I had a selection that was really concise, and then I couldn't resist kind of going back into the collection and just like digging deeper into it. And the work just next to it has a de Kooning in it, and then it has portraits of Elaine de Kooning painted by Alex Katz and more Philip Pearlstein figures. And de Kooning, of course, is so associated with the East End and Lee Krasner and Elaine de Kooning and that whole generation.
Is your focus not exclusively, but you're including a lot of artists that lived here that had a real significance on the East End. Was that on purpose, or did that just happen?
I think that just happened, and I think it happens because they're also New York artists,
right?
And
right, that's for sure.
And I think I grew up in New York, so I think I saw a lot of these works ever since I was a kid, and so it is on purpose to work with these kind of iconic works, just to kind of reckon with them, and like sort of going back to what we were talking about a little earlier, to reckon with that ambivalence and the friction and this kind of like legacy, this very patriarchal legacy, to not in every work. It's not directly about inverting that, but just using it for my own purposes and just being playful, whether it's playful or whether it's critical. So finding this work of de Kooning and the back of his head, just looking at his first woman painting seemed like it related to kind of every work that I have here in some way or another, but in particular to the works that are more pointedly like dealing with this like legacy of patriarchy in art history and aggression and also just I love seeing artists in their studio and that moment of like when something's like I searched and searched, like that's not quite the final version of the painting. I found different years attributed to it. I found something that said that was his studio in the city, but I'd like to think it was his studio in the spring.
Well, there is a beauty in seeing artists contemplating their works and seeing where they are with it. So I think again there's a lot of messages in this that you're revealing and that you're kind of juxtaposing with your own work.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, and I think also, there's an aspect of these works that use so many other artists' works in them, which not all of my collage works do, but this particular group does, and it can be kind of like, oh, who's that, like a kind of game. It's not a test, but there's, I think, a pleasure and a fun in that, and it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And it's like if you recognize it and it feels familiar, or you think you know it, like that's all part of why I think it's interesting to work with other artists' work. And to acknowledge how much that plays into, and not for every artist, but for me, really plays into how I think.
Right.
So I feel like this just encapsulates all of that, and also just the kind of reflective and reflexive process of like looking at artwork and looking at an artist looking at their artwork at the same time, and there's a lot of like looping in and out. So.
Right. Would you like to talk about these works as well?
These, I don't know if I have like more things to say, but
more Philip Herstein,
like the one on the end was one of the earlier ones of this group, and that is a Barry LeVay on the floor. There's a Carrie Mae Weems. There's a lot of other photography in these. So. There's something from a very well-known series of Carrie Mae Weems photographs that I love. Mm-hmm. Like there were some works chosen because I love them, and then there are also I think I could use that. And then there's a small Philip Pearlstein. I think maybe that was the first, or actually may have been one of the first. Doesn't matter. Works I used Philip Pearlstein's in. Mm-hmm. And there's I think a playfulness in this in this one. And once I started using the Klimt with the Pearlstein, one of those figures is not totally cut out of the Philip Pearlstein painting, but includes a rug that he meticulously painted with his muscular. And I just thought it was just weird with the Klimt, and that it sort of felt the same and seemed like this kind of bacchanal and. There's playful choices to evoke an atmosphere and a feeling, and make space.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to ask you, sort of in concluding and seeing if there's other questions, what was it like to go through our collection? I mean, we have 3,600 works. Where did you even begin, to look? So at first, we invited the artists to go through the collection online, and then we actually have most of the works right here, so they were able to come and see them in person, which always elicited a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah. It's a really fun assignment. And I think one of the great things about the way this show came together is that each artist interpreted how to deal with that very differently, and that you trusted artists to make different choices about that. And I think it's very revealing about how an artist works and thinks. So that's one part of it. Going through the collection, it's vast, and this is going through online initially, so it was like a labor in a way.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem seeing images online. I feel like I'm used to it, but then it was really interesting to come and see them in person. But I started looking for the Philip Pearlstein, and I found it.
Yeah.
And then I found the Annie Leibovitz photo, and then I was searching for something by Carolee Schneemann, and I mentioned that to Corinne, who said, well, we don't have one, but there's a photograph of her. And then I just kept searching. I found Mary Ellen's photo, and I was like, what? And I don't think I was originally including these works, and then I just decided to include those works because I was like, I have to have this in here. So it came about organically, and also just through like a drive to uncover.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure, and it I felt like it dovetailed like super perfectly with the way that I'm working with other artists' work. So. is kind of, yeah.
No, it's beautiful
It was a pleasure.
how you and many other artists just really sort of unearthed, all these connections and relationships with the artists that came before you, right? And to create these connections and telling a new story also of our collection. So thank you, Alex. I want to see if there's any questions for Alex at this point. Yes. Yes, 2 questions.
These are so meticulously done.
Yeah.
Are they the actual collage painted on, or is it a photograph of the collage?
Yeah, I'm just cutting things out with a scissor. and knives, and it's traditional collage technique, yeah.
So it's the actual collage. It's not a picture of the collage.
It's the actual collage, yeah.
Mary?
Archival.
Oh, I wanted to ask if you had ever had any issues of copyright of reproducing.
Good question.
Has that ever come up for you?
Not with these, no. I mean, I don't think it's within the copyright problem.
If it's been published already, then be free for you to take.
To take the published material. Yeah.
But to your point, like the whole Orwell case recently, the Supreme Court, I hate it.
So it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most interesting aspects of the work is the role that reproduction and photography plays, because for the sources, there are artworks that were photographed for publicity purposes, like catalogs or something, and then that becomes, the publicity an artist gets becomes part of how they're received in their story. And so it's, and in like the case of Close, it's so siloed into like his technique, who he chose, the way he did it, and then the fame that he gained from gaining like his, photorealism and those techniques, and then all the publicity, and then to sort of dismantle that by literally cutting it apart and recombining it to like make a new story. And that story is sort of taking the photographs. You're not doing the same thing. To me, when somebody gets in trouble for copyright, it's because they're trying to do the same thing as the artist did, where you're absolutely not doing the same thing. You're doing something incredibly different. That's the complexity of it.
And I think that's the point also if you're talking about rights, is as long as you're altering it in some ways.
Altering it, yeah.
Then
I haven't looked into it, but I think I'm safe.
Yeah.
I once had an issue with a video where I used music and it was a section of the video was shown on television in Britain, and they changed the music because I think I went like 2 seconds over the amount of music you're allowed to sample or something, and who knew? But yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you think a lot about scale?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the decisions I'm making, and when I talk about, I guess, utility, it's their formal, it's formal choices, and like relationships and scale can shift what the psychological relationship is, so there were a couple of videos that I made a long time ago where I used cutout figures from magazines that were hung on a piece of monofilament that was kind of right in front of the camera, and then and other performers performed in the space. So it made a scale relationship where it looked like the performer was doing the same scale, like human scale, with these figures. And I mean, I don't know if that description conveys, but like working with these cutout figures and scale has been, yes, very, very, like part of my work in ways that are not even evident here, but like deeply in my work, yeah.
You haven't rescaled anything so as to make it fit what your vision was.
Well, yeah, everything's cut. There's nothing rephotographed or printed. It's not that I wouldn't do that. That's just not what I'm doing here. I don't feel morally against it, but yeah, I just find the things I need. And
Well, thank you, Alex, so much for this talk.
Thank
and thank
you.
you for coming.